everyone, and welcome to today's video. A couple days ago, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, addressed the UN with an interesting speech in which he talked a lot about climate change.
President Trump is about to address the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly.
A lot of the things he said are debatable.
The carbon footprint is a hoax.
Does the President of the United States think that climate change is a hoax? What's up with that?
I feel very happy to be up here with you, nevertheless.
Before we get started, make sure to subscribe and give me a like and a comment because it really helps with our engagement, and it's been a dream of mine to build this science channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to President Donald Trump addressing the United Nations General Assembly. The climate change section starts around 34 minutes, so let's get started around there.
Energy is another area where the United States is now thriving like never before. We're getting rid of the falsely named renewables. By the way, they're a joke. They don't work.
Oh, they definitely work.
They're too expensive.
If I'm being generous, on the short term, I can see how someone might think this. However, it's been proven the cost of renewable resources will continue to fall with increasing advancements in science and technology. But even if it was true that it's extraordinarily more expensive than non-renewable sources, non-renewable resources are finite. There's only a certain amount of them. You can continue to harvest coal, but at some point you're gonna run out of coal. And if you haven't developed a solution with greener technology, you have no way of powering anything.
They're not strong enough to fire up the plants that you need to make your country great.
What?
The wind doesn't blow. Those big windmills are so pathetic and so bad.
Frankly, this point makes no sense to me. The estimate is that by 2027, 95% of the world's energy could be produced with renewable energy sources. Right now, about 90% of renewable energy projects are less expensive than their fossil fuel counterparts.
And most of them are built in China, and I give China a lot of credit. They build them, but they have very few wind farms. So why is it that they build them and they send them all over the world, but they barely use them? You know what they use? Coal. They use gas. They use almost anything, but they don't like wind.
Okay.
They sure as hell like selling the windmills.
Daniel Dale, a journalist for the CNN, confirms that China is the world's leader in the generation of wind power and has more massive wind farms on and offshore than any other country.
Germany was being led down a very sick path, both on immigration, by the way, and on energy. They were going green, and they were going bankrupt.
Okay.
And the new
Never heard about that.
New leadership came in, and they went back to where they were, with fossil fuel and with nuclear, which is good.
Nuclear is good. It was been safe for a while.
You can do it properly.
Germany's Foreign Office has countered such claims directly, stating that greater than 50% of their energy comes from renewable resources, and they are working to phase out coal.
Yes, protecting the climate has been a top priority for Germans.
I'll be very badly criticized for saying it, but
Oh, you might be.
I'm here to tell the truth. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me.
Me too.
I'm in New York City. I'm feeling a lot safer. Crime, we're getting crime down. And by the way, speaking of crime, Washington, D.C.
Where is this going? I have no idea about the safeness of Washington, D.C.
They've given up their powerful edge, a lot of the countries that we're talking about, in oil and gas, such as essentially
Okay, we're back
closing
on
the
track.
great North Sea oil. Oh, the North Sea, I know it so well.
The Great North Sea's oil rigs are not completely closed. They are being decommissioned slowly and being phased out, but there are rigs still currently operating. The UK's Department for Energy, Security and Net Zero announced recently that new projects would have to take into consideration the environmental impacts. It only makes sense that a responsible government would enact policies to ensure that these things are taken into consideration.
But we're not letting this happen in America. In 1982, the executive director of the United Nations Environmental Program predicted that by the year 2000, another UN official stated in 1989 that within a decade, entire nations could be wiped off the map by global warming. Not happening.
Not happened yet.
Because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, this climate change, it's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. Climate change, no matter what happens, you're involved in that. No more global warming, no more global cooling, all of these
Why would we lie about this?
Predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong.
Why would we make up a
They
lie
were
and
made
then
by
change?
stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same
That's
countries no
nice.
chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to
Oh.
fail. And I'm really good at predicting things, you know? They actually said during the campaign, they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true.
Braggadocious.
I've been right about everything.
Right about everything. No one's right about everything. That's what we admit in science, that we're not right about everything. We were not right that it was just warming, and that's why we moved towards this title of climate change. It's not just warming.
A few years ago, I remember hearing about the carbon footprint, and then President Obama would get into Air Force One, a massive Boeing 747, and not a new one, an old one with old engines that spew everything into the atmosphere.
Although this article was written a few years ago, it states that Donald Trump actually flew his private airplane more than Obama and spent more time golfing than he did.
He talked about the carbon footprint. We
Yes.
must do so. Then he'd get in
Politicians are often hypocrites.
and he'd fly from Washington to Hawaii to play a round of golf.
You're not doing the same. Frankly, the idea of private jets reeks of classism and overconsumption. It is completely irresponsible and is sacrificing a great deal of fossil fuels to move around only a couple people. It's completely unsustainable and inefficient.
And then he'd get back onto that big, beautiful plane and he'd fly back and he'd talk about, again, global warming and the carbon footprint.
I'm completely of the opinion that everyone should travel commercial, and we should attempt to travel by air as little as possible. I look forward to hearing about the president traveling in commercial from now on, as he clearly indicates that traveling by private jet is a complete waste of the precious resources we have here on Earth.
Much of it coming from China, and which now produces more CO2 than all the other developed nations in the world.
Hannah Ritchie and Max Roser write for Our World Data that in fact Asia is the greatest contributor to world CO2 emissions. However, it is also home to 60% of the world's population. That means per individual person actually living in Asia, their CO2 emissions are actually significantly lower than the world average. Asia's rapid increase in CO2 emissions has co-occurred with an increase in living standards. It's a really difficult situation when we have to allow countries to develop, increase the quality of life of their people, and also decrease CO2 emissions. But Our World Data does state that the United States has emitted more CO2 than any other country historically, with it emitting 400 billion tons since 1751. So the US might be making great steps now, but in its past, it definitely contributed to high CO2 emissions.
In the United States, we have still radicalized environmentalists, and they want the factories to stop. Everything should stop. No more cows. We don't want cows anymore. I guess they want to kill all the cows. They want to do things that are just unbelievable, and you have it too.
I don't want to kill the cows.
And if we had the most clean air, and I think we do, we have very clean air. We have the cleanest air we've had in many, many years.
America has the most clean air. Air and water pollution are becoming huge concerns for world population. It doesn't help that Trump is making claims that are completely baseless. New York Times author Naja Popovich states in 2019 that currently we're seeing a slight uptick in air pollution in the United States. That means that countries are actually doing better to reduce this type of pollution than in the United States. So it's definitely not true that America has the cleanest air in the world.
And no matter what you're doing down here,
okay.
the air up here tends to get very dirty because it comes in from other countries where their air isn't so clean. And the environmentalists refuse to acknowledge that.
We refuse to acknowledge that the atmosphere is dynamic and global. Another point that Trump makes several times is that the air and water are shared resources. In fact, the president states that scientists do not recognize these two things as dynamic and shared. Frankly, I've never met a scientist that didn't understand that water and air are shared resources that are dynamic, but I digress.
Same thing with garbage. In Asia, they dump much of their garbage right into the ocean.
Did you know that much of that garbage is actually garbage created here in North America that we ship over to Asia?
And then somebody will get in trouble because he dropped a cigarette.
Well, why would you do that, though? There's no
The
reason.
whole thing is crazy.
Just because they do it, we can do it. And then Trump just continuously goes back to this idea. If one country is polluting the environment, why should another country not pollute the environment? And talks about how Asia is dumping trash into the ocean. So, why not throw your cigarette on the beach in Los Angeles?
The primary effect of these brutal green energy policies has not been to help the environment, but to redistribute manufacturing and industrial activity from developed countries that follow the insane rules that are put down to polluting countries that break the rules and are making a fortune. They're making a fortune.
A few things come to mind here. But first of all, the idea of equity versus equality. This graphic, I think, sums it up really well. Not every country can afford to put the same efforts into environmental protections as others. It frankly seems ludicrous to ask a country that is struggling with feeding its population to invest energy in green initiatives. On the other hand, in stable, developed countries, it makes sense to put money into these efforts.
That's why in America I withdrew from the fake Paris Climate Accord, where, by the way, America was paying so much more than every country.
Trump was specifically hurt by the idea that China didn't have to pay into the Paris Agreement until 2030, and that Russia's climate mitigation targets were set at the 1990 standards. The Paris Accord came into effect for all countries at the same time in November of 2016, but each country set its own targets for reducing carbon emissions. It is unfair and frankly childish to point fingers at other countries that may be attempting to move towards green energy sources but are at a different point of development than your own country. If Donald Trump was to compare countries with similar economics and development levels, he would see that many countries are actually doing more than the United States and have set targets that are more lofty, although in many cases, we're not meeting these targets at all.
For the United States, we're supposed to pay like $1 trillion. And I said, this is another scam. The fact is, the United States has been taken advantage of by the world for many, many years, but not any longer, as you probably noticed.
Trump specifically cites this particular statistic that the US is supposed to pay $1 trillion. Honestly, I have no idea where he got this number, because every single source I've looked at has stated that this number is completely exaggerated. The United States has never spent or committed to spend anywhere near $1 trillion in connection with the Paris Accord. However, the previous administration before Trump did pledge to spend $11.4 billion per year working towards more climate-friendly solutions.
But we stand ready to provide any country with abundant, affordable energy supplies if you need them, when most of you do. We're proudly exporting energy all over the world. We're now the largest exporter.
Luckily, journalists Glasser, Manzo, and Peck, writing for ABC News, state that as of 2024, 80% of growth in global energy production was in the renewable energy sector, including nuclear, which means about 40% of global energy production as of 2024 was renewable. And in 2024, America even produced more electricity with solar and wind than with coal.
In the United States, we want trade and robust commerce with all nations, everybody. We want to help nations. We're going to help nations. But it must also be fair and reciprocal. The challenge with trade is much the same with climate. The countries that followed the rules, all their factories have been plundered. It's really sad to watch. They've been broken. They've been broken by countries that broke the rules.
All of this brings to mind an idea that we learned very early in my environmental science degree, the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons, simply put, is that the idea that a shared resource will be taken advantage of. Basically, if a group of people have access to one finite resource, it is likely to be depleted because people will act in their self-interest. This is what scientists and politicians and many other people are trying to avoid. However, this is a trap that Donald Trump is falling right into. Because what happens if everyone is selfish and takes as much as they can of a finite shared resource? There'll be nothing left. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what other science videos you'd like to see in the comment section down below. Make sure to subscribe, leave me a comment and a like, and stay tuned for more science videos. Stay curious.